Ambassador Diana Foster had heard the word primitive exactly 47 times in her 20 years serving humanity on the Galactic Council. Today would be number 48, and something inside her finally crystallized into diamond-hard resolve. The council chamber sprawled before her like an amphitheater designed by species who wanted everyone to know their place. Humanity's delegation sat in the outer ring, furthest from the central podium where High Arbiter Tolveen held court. The Sivarian leader's skin shimmered with bioluminescent patterns that his species used to display superiority. Right now, those patterns were pulsing with what Diana had learned to recognize as contempt. "The matter of the New Perth incident," Tolveen announced, his translator converting his clicks and whistles into flat, emotionless words, "has been reviewed by this council. We find no grounds for intervention." Diana felt Captain Owen Reed stiffen beside her. Owen had served on the Meridian Dawn for 15 years, ferrying diplomats back and forth between Earth and this station. His gray eyes had watched humanity swallow insult after insult, always believing the diplomatic process would eventually work. "New Perth wasn't an incident," Diana said, her voice carrying across the chamber. "It was a massacre. 3,000 colonists killed by Hurricane raiders. We have evidence, we have testimony, we have the coordinates of their base." Onslere Mrek, a small amphibious being from a minor world, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He was one of the few who had ever shown humanity genuine respect, but he said nothing. "Human colonies," Tolveen continued as if Diana hadn't spoken, "are established in contested space. The risks are known. The Council cannot police every frontier disagreement." "Disagreement?" Commander Lewis Grant growled from behind Diana. His hand rested on his sidearm, not threatening, just there. "They bombed civilian shelters. They executed children." "Emotional outbursts do not change Council policy," replied Representative Shala, a mantis-like Drellin whose species had voted against every human proposal for the last 73 years. "Perhaps humans should reconsider colonization if they cannot defend their settlements adequately." The chamber filled with sounds that the translators rendered as agreement. Clicks, hums, whistles, all blending into a symphony of dismissal. Diana stood slowly. The chamber didn't quiet. Nobody cared when humans stood. "For 73 years," she began, and this time something in her tone made a few nearby delegates pause. "Humanity has followed every rule. We have paid every fee. We have attended every session. We have provided medical aid, technological support, and cultural exchange. We have been patient." "Yes. Yes." Tolveen waved the appendage dismissively. "And humanity is recognized for its contributions. But you must understand, younger species require time to mature into full council participation. Perhaps another century of observing proper protocols will—" "We requested protected trade routes," Diana interrupted. "Denied. We requested defense treaties. Denied. We requested tariff equality. Denied. We requested investigation into corporate espionage against human firms. Denied. We requested, because you do not yet understand galactic realities." Shala's voice rose to a screech. "You arrive in this galaxy and expect immediate equality with civilizations that have existed for millennia? Your species was still hunting with stone tools when my ancestors built quantum networks across 3-star clusters. We requested basic decency," Diana finished quietly. That too was denied. Tolveen's patterns shifted to amusement. "Ambassador Foster, I understand you are upset. But these theatrical displays are precisely why humanity struggles to gain respect. You are too emotional, too impulsive, too primitive in your thinking. Come back when you have composed yourself and we can discuss—" "No." The single syllable dropped into the chamber like a stone into still water. "I'm sorry?" Tolveen leaned forward, his translator making his confusion sound almost mechanical. "No," Diana repeated. "We will not come back, we will not discuss, we will not request, propose, or petition. We are done." Owen stood beside her, then Lewis. Then every human in the delegation rose as one. "This council has made its position clear," Diana continued. "You view humanity as children to be managed. primitives to be educated, newcomers to be tolerated. You have answered our requests for justice with laughter. You have met our calls for help with bureaucracy. You have treated our dead as acceptable casualties. Ambassador, you are speaking rashly. Counselor Mrek tried to interject genuine concern in his voice. We came to this council seeking cooperation, Diana said, gathering her datapad and documents. We believed in the promise of a galactic community. We thought if we proved ourselves patient, reasonable, and civilized by your standards, we would be welcomed as equals. She walked toward the exit. The entire human delegation followed. Where do you think you are going? Tolveen demanded. This session is not concluded. Diana paused at the entrance and turned back. The entire council chamber stared at her now. She had their attention at last. For the record, she said, humanity formally withdraws from all council initiatives, projects, and programs. Effective immediately, all human diplomatic personnel are recalled to Earth. All human trade agreements with council species are suspended pending review. All human-maintained infrastructure will be transferred to council management within 30 days. All human military cooperation with council security forces is terminated. The chamber erupted. Multiple species tried to speak at once, translators creating a cacophony of overlapping voices. Tolveen's patterns flashed bright red. You cannot simply leave. There are protocols, procedures, legal frameworks. You taught us that rules don't matter, Diana replied. You taught us that justice is optional. You taught us that the strong do as they please. Thank you for the education. Humanity is a quick learner. This is ridiculous, Shala screeched. You are throwing a tantrum like the children you are. Diana smiled then, and something about that smile made Counselor Mrek shrink back in his seat. You'll realize soon enough, Diana said softly, that humanity's greatest strength was never our technology or our military. It was our patience and our memory. We will remember every dismissal, every insult, every one of our dead you ignored. She walked out. The human delegation followed in perfect silence. Behind them, the council chamber descended into chaos. Tolveen was shouting orders. Shala was demanding human assets be seized. Counselor Mrek sat very still, calculating something that made his skin turn pale gray. Aboard the Meridian Dawn, Owen sealed the airlock and turned to Diana. That was either the bravest or most foolish thing I've ever witnessed. Diana looked out the viewport at the massive council station, at the hundreds of ships from species. Across the galaxy, at the infrastructure humanity had helped build and maintain. They wanted to see primitive, she said quietly. They're about to learn what humans are really like when we stop being civilized. The Meridian Dawn broke orbit and jumped to hyperspace, carrying humanity's last ambassador away from the Galactic Council. In the station behind them, nobody noticed the small changes already beginning. A communication relay went offline. A water purification system started running at reduced efficiency. A medical database access request returned an error. The council laughed about humanity's tantrum for 3 days. Then the laughter stopped. 3 months passed and the galaxy moved as it always had. Cargo ships jumped between stars. The Galactic Council held its sessions. Markets traded goods across 1,000 worlds. Nobody thought much about humanity's absence except as an amusing anecdote about emotional species who couldn't handle proper civilization. Admiral Patricia Cole watched Earth from her office window and waited. She had commanded the Third Fleet for 8 years, and she understood something most civilians didn't. Warfare was only partly about shooting. The rest was logistics, timing, and patience. Right now, humanity was fighting without firing a single shot. Admiral, another request from the Drellin Commerce Authority, her aide reported. They're asking when human freighters will resume their regular routes through the spiral arm. Forward it to the Diplomatic Corps, Patricia replied. Oh, wait, we don't have one anymore. Her aide permitted himself a small smile. The Drellins won't find it amusing, sir. No, Patricia agreed. They won't. Across the galaxy on Forge Haven, Governor Henry Park reviewed production reports and nodded with satisfaction. The industrial colony produced advanced computer components that humanity had supplied to 40 different species. The factories were still running at full capacity. The warehouses were filling up nicely. but not a single shipment had left the planet in 3 months. Governor, the Sivarian Trade Consortium is offering triple the standard rate for our quantum processors, his assistant said. Henry didn't look up from his tablet. Tell them we're experiencing technical difficulties. They'll know we're lying. Yes, Henry said. They will. On the merchant vessel Quick Profit, Captain Alessa Rowe was explaining reality to a very frustrated Callan trade representative. The six-limbed alien gestured frantically at the cargo manifest on the screen. You have 17 tons of medical supplies in your hold, the Callan chittered. My world needs those supplies. We have a contract. Had a contract, Alessa corrected. She leaned back in her chair, her boots propped on the console. That contract was negotiated under the Galactic Trade Framework. Humanity's not part of that framework anymore. But people will die without those medicines. Should have thought of that before your council representative laughed when our colony got attacked. Alessa shrugged. Not my problem anymore. The Callan's mandibles quivered. You cannot withhold medical supplies. That violates the humanitarian protocols humanity wrote, by the way, Alessa interrupted. Protocols your people voted to exempt humans from because we were too primitive to understand proper medical practice. Remember that debate? I do. She cut the transmission and plotted a course back to human space. Behind her, the Callan station grew smaller in the viewport. Their medical crisis would get worse. Much worse. Humans had developed 90% of broad-spectrum medicines because human doctors had this annoying habit of trying to heal everyone. Not just their own species. The galaxy was starting to realize it had a problem. The Galactic Communication Network was the first major system to show serious symptoms. The network connected every council world with faster-than-light data transmission. It was considered one of the galactic wonders, maintained by a consortium of species with humanity providing a modest supporting role. Except humanity's modest role included maintaining 40% of the relay stations, writing 60% of the security protocols, and designing the data compression algorithms that made the whole system fast enough to be useful. When human technicians stopped showing up for their shifts, the network continued running. For a while, then relay stations started experiencing small glitches. Nothing major at first. A delay here, some packet loss there. The consortium's engineers fixed what they could, but the problems kept spreading. We need the source code for the compression algorithms, the lead Sivarian engineer reported to his supervisor. The human-designed systems are degrading. Humans don't own those algorithms, the supervisor replied. They were developed under council contracts. Access the repository. The repository requires human encryption keys. Then break the encryption. 3 weeks later, the supervisor received a report that breaking the encryption would take approximately 16 years with current technology. The humans had been very thorough. Councillor Mrek sat in his small office on the council station and read reports that nobody else seemed to be taking seriously. His species wasn't powerful or influential, but they were good at seeing patterns. The pattern forming across the galaxy looked very bad. Human colonies had stopped exporting. That was obvious. But the data showed something more concerning. Dozens of sectors were experiencing increased piracy. Trade routes that had been safe for decades were now dangerous. Medical supplies were running short on 37 worlds. Industrial production was down across the board. Mrek pulled up another file. Human military deployments. Before the walkout, human warships had participated in joint peacekeeping operations in 14 different regions. They provided patrol support, convoy protection, and rapid response to pirate activity. It was work that seemed minor, almost beneath notice. The humans did it quietly, without demanding recognition. Now those patrols were gone. The pirates noticed immediately. This is connected, Mrek muttered to himself. He started cross-referencing data. Every sector showing increased piracy was a sector where human patrols had operated. Every world with medical shortages had imported human pharmaceuticals. Every trade route experiencing delays relied on human-maintained infrastructure. He pulled up economic data and felt his skin turn cold. Human consumers represented the largest single market for luxury goods in the galaxy. Humans bought more art, music, literature, and cultural items than any 3 other species combined. They attended alien festivals, studied alien languages, collected alien artifacts. All of that had stopped. The Sivarian entertainment industry, which had boomed for decades selling to human markets, was reporting losses. Drellin art collectors were panicking as their biggest buyers disappeared. Even the prestigious Galactic Cultural Exchange was facing bankruptcy because 60% of its funding came from human sources. Rek composed a report and marked it urgent. He sent it to the High Arbiter and every council member. He tried to explain what the data showed. Humanity wasn't just another council species. They had quietly become woven into the fabric of galactic civilization. Their trade, their infrastructure maintenance, their medical research, their military support, their cultural enthusiasm, all of it was load-bearing. Remove it and things started to collapse. High Arbiter Tolveen read exactly 3 paragraphs of the report before deleting it. Clearly, Counselor Marek was being alarmist. The galaxy had existed for millions of years before humanity arrived. It would continue just fine without them. On a human colony at the edge of known space, Rebecca Stone stood at her husband's grave. The Hurricane Raiders had killed him 3 months ago. The council had done nothing. She placed flowers on the simple marker, and then walked to the spaceport where she'd signed up for the Colonial Defense Force. "You sure about this?" the recruiter asked. "It's not going to be like before. We're not playing defense anymore." Rebecca looked at the list of raids the Hurricane had conducted since New Perth. 7 more human colonies hit. 2,000 more dead. The council called it frontier disputes and advised humanity to withdraw from contested space. "I'm sure," Rebecca said. The recruiter nodded and handed her a data pad. As Rebecca filled out the forms, she noticed a new line item in the contract. Under the section labeled Rules of Engagement, there was a single sentence where there used to be 3 pages of regulations. Win. On the council station, Administrator Venn of the Severian Trade Bureau stood in a conference room filled with angry representatives from a dozen species. They were all shouting at once about disrupted supply chains, canceled contracts, and economic losses. "Order," Venn shouted. "This is productive for no one." "How can we maintain order?" a Callan delegate demanded. "The humans have cut us off completely. No communication, no trade, no cooperation. So we deal with other species," Venn replied. "The galaxy does not revolve around humanity. Who else manufactures the medical compounds we need?" The Callan shot back. "Who else wrote the software our hospitals run on? Who else trained our emergency response teams? We will find alternatives. Before or after people die." Venn had no answer to that. High Arbiter Tolveen received the economic reports and waved them away. Temporary disruption. Market adjustment. Growing pains. The galaxy would adapt. It always did. He never noticed that the lights in his office flickered slightly. Just for a moment. A power fluctuation in the station's grid. The human technician who used to maintain that grid wasn't there to fix it anymore. Warlord Gresh considered himself a practical being. He commanded 17 raider ships and controlled 3 profitable sectors where weak species paid tribute or died. The Hurricane way was simple. Take what you want. Kill who resists. The strong survive. Humans, he had learned, were soft. They built colonies on frontier worlds but barely defended them. They called for help instead of fighting. They whined to the council about justice and law. Perfect Prey New Perth had been profitable. Good salvage, decent slaves for the markets, and the best part was no consequences. The council had dismissed the human complaints just as Gresh knew they would. Now it was time for another harvest. New Glasgow, his navigator reported. Human mining colony. Population 4,000. Defense is minimal according to our scans. Gresh clicked his mandibles in satisfaction. Good, same pattern as before. Hit fast, take everything, leave nothing. The Hurricane fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the New Glasgow system. 17 ships against a single mining colony. It would be over in hours. On New Glasgow, the alert sirens began wailing. Colonel David Hunt watched the radar display and allowed himself a cold smile. Finally, all civilians to bunkers, he ordered. Combat teams to positions. Lieutenant Frank Morris, fresh out of academy, looked nervous. "Sir, we're outnumbered. Shouldn't we call for support?" "Support is already here," Hunt replied. "They just don't know it yet." Frank didn't understand, but he moved to his station. He'd been trained for defensive operations. Hold position, protect civilians, call for help. That was the human way. That used to be the human way. The Hurricane ships moved into attack formation. Gresh watched the colony through his view screen and saw what he expected. The mining facilities were exposed. The residential areas were clustered together. The humans were transmitting distress calls that nobody would answer. All ships weapons free, Gresh ordered. Show them what happens to... His sensor operator made a choking sound. Warlord! New contacts. Multiple signatures appearing across the system. Gresh spun to look at the display. Ship signatures were blooming everywhere. Not just a few, dozens, no hundreds. Small contacts moving at impossible speeds. What are those? He demanded. Unknown configuration. They're not broadcasting identification. They're just... hunting. The word sent an instinctive chill through Gresh's combat implants. Predators didn't hunt. They were the hunters. The first Hurricane ship died without ever seeing what killed it. A human strike craft, no bigger than a fighter, hit it with a precision missile that punched through shields like they weren't there. The raider vessel broke apart in a silent explosion. Evasive action, Gresh roared. All ships defensive formation. But there was no defensive formation that helped. The human craft were everywhere, moving with coordination that spoke of perfect communication and training. They weren't defending. They were executing. A second raider ship vanished in fire. Then a third. Gresh tried to target one of the human craft and found his weapons couldn't lock on. They were too fast, too agile, using tactics his sensors couldn't predict. Warlord, we need to retreat, his navigator shouted. Do it. All ships jump to hyperspace. 5 ships tried to jump. Their hyperdrives engaged for exactly 3 seconds before human electronic warfare systems fried their navigation computers. The ships dropped back into normal space, helpless. They're blocking our escape, the navigator said, his voice breaking. They knew we'd try to run. They planned for it. Gresh realized something then that made his blood cold. This wasn't a battle. It was an extermination. On New Glasgow, Frank watched the tactical display with growing awe. The Hurricane fleet was being dismantled with surgical precision. Human forces weren't even taking fire. They just moved through the enemy formation like sharks through fish. Sir, should we provide support? Frank asked. Colonel Hunt shook his head. Third Fleet doesn't need our help. They need us to watch. Watch what? What happens when humanity stops being nice? In space, Admiral Patricia Cole commanded the operation from her flagship. She watched as her pilots executed the battle plan with flawless efficiency. Every Hurricane ship was targeted. Every escape route was blocked. Every weapon was disabled before it could fire. Admiral, the enemy commander is hailing us, her communications officer reported. Put him through. Warlord Gresh's face appeared on screen. His species translator made his panic sound almost calm, but Patricia could see the truth in his eyes. I surrender, Gresh said. Under the Galactic Conventions of War, I claim protection as a... No, Patricia interrupted. What? Humanity is no longer bound by council conventions, Patricia explained. Her voice was pleasant, professional. We're not council members. Those rules don't apply to us anymore. You wanted to see primitive? This is primitive. You can't just execute prisoners. That's a war crime. According to whose laws? Patricia asked. The council's? The same council that said our dead colonists were an acceptable loss? The same council that refused to help us? We're not bound by their laws anymore, Gresh. We're making our own. She cut the transmission and opened a channel to her fleet. All ships. No survivors. No prisoners, no mercy. Show the galaxy what happens when you attack humans and expect us to follow someone else's rules. The remaining Hurricane ships died in the next 17 minutes. It was methodical, efficient, and absolutely ruthless. When it was over, there was nothing left but debris. On New Glasgow, the colonists emerged from their bunkers to find the system cleared. Not a single enemy ship remained functional. Human warships hung in orbit like guardian angels with guns. Frank looked at the aftermath on his tactical display. We just wiped out an entire fleet. No, Colonel Hunt corrected. We eliminated a threat. There's a difference. What difference? Hunt pulled up a star chart showing Hurricane space. Before today, the Hurricane had 47 raider fleets operating across 6 sectors. They've been a problem for decades. The Council's response was to negotiate, set up protected zones, pay tribute to keep them peaceful. Didn't work, Frank observed. No, because the Hurricane don't understand negotiation. They understand strength. Hunt highlighted 3 locations on the map. Third Fleet's other task groups are hitting Hurricane bases right now. Not their military targets, their homes, their resource stations, their leadership. Frank felt sick. That's terrorism. No, Hunt said quietly. That's war without civilization getting in the way. The Hurricane chose to prey on humans. They assumed we'd cry to the council like everyone else. They were wrong. Across 6 sectors, human forces hit Hurricane positions with overwhelming force. They didn't occupy. They didn't negotiate. They didn't take prisoners. They destroyed the raider infrastructure so completely that surviving Hurricane would have nothing to return to. Warlord Gresh's base was a massive asteroid complex that housed 15,000 Hurricane and their families. Human Marines breached it in 30 minutes. They gave the civilians 10 minutes to evacuate. Then they collapsed the entire complex with precision charges. Gresh's final transmission was broadcast across all Hurricane channels. They fight like they have no gods to answer to. He was right. The human forces operated with cold efficiency that ignored every rule of warfare the galaxy considered civilized. They didn't hate the Hurricane. Hate was emotional. This was systematic pest control. When word spread across the galaxy, the reaction was shock. Species who had dismissed humans as too soft, too emotional, too primitive, suddenly had to reconcile that image with the reality of human military power, unleashed from council restrictions. On the council station, High Arbiter Tolveen watched the reports with growing horror. How many Hurricane ships? 3 entire fleets, his intelligence officer reported. Gone, plus 4 major bases destroyed and 8 supply stations eliminated. Casualties? Hurricane. Estimated 25,000 human, 17 wounded, none killed. Tolveen's bioluminescent patterns flickered with confusion. That's impossible. The Hurricane have been raiding for centuries. They know how to fight. They know how to fight species bound by council rules, the officer corrected. The humans aren't playing by those rules anymore. Counselor Mrek sat in the observer gallery and watched the council's emergency session dissolve into chaos. Species were shouting accusations, demanding humanity be sanctioned, calling for military intervention. But Mrek noticed something they didn't. The species doing the most shouting were the ones furthest from human space. The ones close to humanity's borders were very, very quiet. They understood what the others didn't. Humanity had been holding back. For 73 years, they had fought with one hand tied behind their backs, following council rules that protected their enemies more than themselves. Now the hand was free, and the galaxy was learning what humans were really like when you took civilization away. Representative Shala was screeching about human barbarism when Mrek finally stood. "Shut up," he said quietly. The chamber fell silent. Mrek never raised his voice. "You created this," Mrek told them. "Every single one of you. You dismissed them. You insulted them. You let their colonists die and called it acceptable losses. You taught them that rules don't matter, that might makes right, that the strong do as they please." "We did no such thing," Tolveen protested. "You did exactly that," Mrek replied. "And now they're showing you what humans look like when they stop trying to be civilized, when they stop following your rules, when they decide they're done being patient." He looked around the chamber at species who suddenly seemed much less certain of themselves. "You wanted to see primitive?" Mrek asked. "Be careful. You might not survive the lesson." Premier Solvath of the Severian Coalition reviewed the economic reports for the 3rd time, hoping the numbers would somehow change. They didn't. His civilization, which had considered itself the height of galactic culture for 5,000 years, was collapsing. "Explain this to me again," he demanded of his economic advisor. "How can the absence of one species cause this much damage?" The advisor, a younger Severian named Kren, pulled up a holographic display. "The humans were integrated into our economy at every level, Premier." "Not obviously. They didn't control any major industries. They just supported everything." "Supported how?" "Our medical industry," Kren began. "Severian physiology is complex. Most medications designed by other species are too harsh for us. Human researchers developed gentle medicine techniques specifically for species with sensitive biology. 90% of our pharmaceuticals use human-developed delivery methods. So we develop our own," Solvath said. "That will take years. And right now we have a plague spreading across 3 worlds because we can't treat it effectively without human medical support." Solvath's bioluminescent patterns dimmed. The plague had started small, a viral mutation that should have been containable, but Severian doctors discovered their treatments were either too weak or too strong. The humans would have known how to calibrate the dosage properly. The humans would have consulted, adjusted, saved lives. The humans were gone. "What else?" Solvath asked, dreading the answer. Our entertainment industry has lost 60% of its revenue. Humans were our biggest consumers of music, art, literature, and cultural experiences. Our luxury goods market has collapsed. Human tourists visited our worlds in numbers that dwarfed all other species combined. Surely other species can fill that gap. Kren made a gesture of negation. Other species don't consume culture the way humans do. Adrenaline might purchase one piece of art in their lifetime. A human might purchase hundreds. Humans didn't just buy our products. They enthusiastically shared them, creating markets we didn't even know existed. The display shifted to show manufacturing data. Our industrial sector is down 40%. We imported critical components from human worlds. We told ourselves we could source them elsewhere, but the human components were simply better. Cheaper, more reliable, better designed. I'm starting to see a pattern, Solvath said bitterly. The pattern is everywhere, Kren confirmed. Humans weren't dominant in any single sector. They were just competent in everything. And they shared that competence freely, asking very little in return except basic respect. Respect the Council had refused to give. Dr. Yuki Tanaka sat in her laboratory on Earth and ignored the seventh message from Severian medical authorities. They were begging now, offering money, technology, trade concessions, anything for her to consult on their plague. Her assistant entered. Doctor, the Severians are offering to name a medical center after you if you'll just review their treatment protocols. Yuki didn't look up from her microscope. No. People are dying. People died on New Perth too, Yuki replied calmly. The Council called it an acceptable loss. So this is an acceptable loss. That's cold. Yes, Yuki agreed. I learned it from the Severians. Her assistant left and Yuki continued her work. She was developing a new generation of medical treatments, not for the Severians but for species that had broken from the Council to form independent relationships with humanity. 38 species so far. They would get human medical expertise. The rest could figure it out themselves. Trade Minister Venn of the Severian government stood before a crowd of angry business owners and tried to maintain order. The crowd wasn't having it. My shipping company is bankrupt, one Severian shouted. Human freighters handled 40% of our logistics. Now our cargo sits in warehouses rotting. My factory can't operate, another called out. The human-made machine components we need aren't available anywhere else. My clinic can't treat patients, a medical administrator added. The human diagnostic software we licensed is locked. We can't access it without their encryption keys. Venn raised his appendages for silence. The government is negotiating with humanity to restore trade relationships. Negotiating? Someone in the crowd screeched. What's to negotiate? Apologize. Give them what they want. Fix this. The Council's position is that humanity overreacted to a minor diplomatic incident, Venn explained, knowing how weak it sounded. We cannot simply surrender to their demands. Why not? The crowd roared back. Our pride isn't worth our economy. Venn had no answer. He left the meeting knowing that public opinion was turning against the government, against the Council, against everyone who had dismissed humanity as insignificant. On the outer edge of Severian space, 3 Severian battle groups assembled for what their admirals believed would be a simple intimidation mission. A human colony called New Athens sat just across the border, technically in disputed space. The admirals would make a show of force, demonstrate Severian military superiority, and remind humanity that they were still the younger species. Admiral Commander Thex commanded the lead battle group. 15 heavy warships, the pride of the Severian fleet, against a human colony that intelligence reported had minimal defenses. Enter the system, Thex ordered. Full sensor sweep. I want those humans to see us coming. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace in a standard intimidation formation, meant to look overwhelming. Thex activated his communication systems to deliver a prepared statement about Severian sovereignty and human aggression. He never got the chance. Every single ship in his fleet went dark simultaneously. Lights, weapons, shields, life support, everything. The vessels hung in space, completely dead. What happened? Thex shouted into the emergency battery-powered communicator. Engineering report! Sir, we're locked out of all systems. Every computer core is frozen. It's like someone just reached in and turned everything off. On Thex's view screen, text appeared. Simple letters in standard galactic script. You have 30 seconds to evacuate to life pods. After that, we stop being gentle. Thex stared at the message, not understanding. Evacuate, they were under attack? But he hadn't seen any human ships, hadn't detected any weapons fire. The counter on his screen started counting down. 29, 28, 27. All hands, abandon ship, Thex ordered. Emergency evacuation. Severian crew scrambled for life pods. The counter kept ticking. 15, 14, 13. At 0, the dead warships suddenly came back to life. Their engines fired at maximum thrust, sending them careening away from the colony. Their weapon systems armed and targeted each other. Their self-destruct sequences initialized. Then just as suddenly everything shut down again. The ships drifted helpless. Another message appeared. Your vessels are now disabled and will remain so for 72 hours. Your life support will function. Your emergency beacons will function. Nothing else. Consider this a warning. Next time you'll be corpses drifting in space and we'll claim we never saw you. Thex floated in his life pod and watched his fleet drift powerlessly. Every ship was intact. Every crew member was alive. But the Severian Navy had been utterly humiliated without a shot being fired. How? He whispered. How did they do that? Light years away, a human cyber warfare officer closed his laptop and smiled. Turns out, he said to his team, when you write someone's operating systems and install their network infrastructure, you keep a few back doors, just in case. News of the Severian fleet's humiliation spread quickly. Other species considering military action against humanity suddenly reconsidered. You couldn't fight an enemy who could turn your own ships against you. Premier Solvath received reports of the incident while sitting in an emergency council session. High Arbiter Tolveen was demanding a united response to human aggression. Human aggression? Solvath interrupted. They didn't destroy the fleet. They didn't kill anyone. They just demonstrated they could have. They violated Severian sovereignty. Tolveen protested. Like we violated theirs by allowing raids on their colonies? Solvath shot back. Like we violated their economic rights by denying fair trade terms? Like we violated their dignity by treating them as children for 70 years? The chamber fell silent. Solvath had been Tolveen's strongest ally. Hearing him defend humanity shocked everyone. My civilization is dying, Solvath said quietly. Our plague is spreading. Our economy is failing. Our military is humiliated. All because we decided humans didn't deserve basic respect. You cannot be suggesting we negotiate from a position of weakness, Shala screeched. I'm suggesting we negotiate before we have no position left at all, Solvath replied. He stood and addressed the council formally. The Severian coalition will be opening independent trade negotiations with humanity, with or without council approval. That's against council bylaws. Tolveen protested, so sue us, Solvath said and walked out. Over the next week, 7 more species announced they would be negotiating with humanity independently. The Council's united front was cracking. On Earth, President Michael Torres reviewed the incoming requests for talks. Hundreds of them. Some species were desperate. Others were pragmatic. A few were genuinely apologetic. How do we respond? His chief of staff asked. Michael thought about New Perth, about the decades of dismissals and insults, about the colonists who died while the council did nothing. We respond with terms, he said. Real terms, not requests, not proposals, terms. And species that want human cooperation can meet them or continue suffering the consequences. That's harsh. Yes, Michael agreed. I learned it from the Galactic Council. In her laboratory, Dr. Yuki Tanaka finally answered her messages. But not to help. She sent the Severian medical authorities a simple response. My time is valuable. If the Severian coalition wishes to consult with human medical experts, the rate is 10 million credits per hour, paid in advance, non-refundable. Take it or leave it. They took it. They had no choice. On the council station, Councillor Marek watched the power dynamics shift in real time. Species that had dismissed humanity were now begging for their return. The economy was in chaos. The security situation was deteriorating, and it had only been 10 months. How long can they hold out? Another minor species representative asked him. Marek pulled up economic projections. At current rates, the Severian coalition will experience total economic collapse in 6 months. The Drellans in 4. Dozens of other species are facing similar timelines. And humanity? Mrek showed graphs of human economic activity. Trade between human colonies was at an all-time high. Their military was expanding. Their technology development was accelerating. Without the burden of supporting ungrateful aliens, humanity was thriving. They don't need us, Mrek said. They never did. We needed them. We just didn't notice until they left. High Arbiter Tolveen watched his civilized galaxy tear itself apart and refused to accept that he was to blame. 1 year had passed since humanity's walkout. 1 year of cascading failures, economic collapse, and the slow realization that the galaxy's infrastructure had been built on a foundation the Council had never bothered to notice. The emergency session had been called by 18 different species, all demanding action, but Tolveen knew that action meant different things to different people now. Half the chamber wanted to negotiate with humanity. The other half wanted blood. Order. Tolveen's translator boomed across the amphitheater. We will have order. The wow. Delegates reluctantly quieted, but the tension was like static in the air. Counselor Mrek stood in the minor species section, and Tolveen felt a flash of anger seeing him. Mrek had been right about everything, and that made him dangerous. This emergency session will address the ongoing economic and security crisis, Tolveen began. Multiple proposals have been submitted regarding humanity. We will hear them in order of... There's nothing to debate, Premier Solvath interrupted. The Sivarian leader looked terrible. His bioluminescent patterns were dim, flickering with stress. We need to formally invite humanity back to the Council and meet their demands. We will not surrender to threats. Representative Shala screeched. The Drellin was one of the few species not seriously affected by humanity's absence. Her worlds were self-sufficient, isolated. She didn't understand what the others were facing. It's not surrender, Solvath said wearily. It's reality. My coalition lost 40,000 citizens to a plague we could have stopped with human help. Our economy has contracted by 60%. Our military is a joke after that humiliation at New Athens, and we're not alone. Other delegates murmured agreement. The Callan representative stood, his 6 limbs shaking. My people are starving. Human agricultural technology kept our worlds fed. Without it, we're facing famine. I need to negotiate with humanity, not debate philosophy. Then negotiate, Shala snapped. But don't drag the Council into capitulation. The Council is already capitulating, Mrek said quietly, but his voice carried. 38 species have opened independent talks with humanity. 12 have signed trade agreements. 5 have signed mutual defense pacts. The Council's authority exists in name only. Tolveen's patterns flashed angry red. Those agreements violate Council bylaws. Species that signed them should be expelled. Go ahead, Solvath challenged. Expel us. See how long your Council lasts when half its members leave. He gestured around the chamber. Look at us, Tolveen. Really look. We're dying. Our economies are failing. Our people are suffering. And why? Because we were too arrogant to treat one species with basic respect. We treated them exactly as their developmental level warranted, Tolveen insisted. They were newcomers. Primitive. They needed guidance, not coddling. They needed trade rights, the Callan delegate said. They needed their dead avenged. They needed to be treated like equals. Simple things. And we refused. Because granting those demands would have set a precedent, Tolveen argued. Every new species would demand immediate equality, regardless of their civilization's maturity. Mrek laughed, a sound his translator rendered as bitter clicks. And now we've set a much worse precedent. We've shown the galaxy what happens when an advanced species decides they're done tolerating the Council's condescension. Every species is watching. Every species is learning. Tolveen wanted to strike him but maintained composure. The Council's principles are sound. We cannot change millennia of tradition because one species threw a tantrum. Tantrum, Solvath repeated slowly. You think this is a tantrum? They systematically withdrew every service we took for granted. They demonstrated military capability that terrifies our generals. They've built alternative alliances that bypass us entirely, and they've done it all in 1 year. He turned to address the full chamber. Humanity isn't having a tantrum. They're replacing us, and they're winning. Ambassador Diana Foster materialized above the central podium, her hologram transmitted from Earth. She hadn't set foot in the council chamber since the walkout, but Tolveen had finally agreed to hear humanity's terms. He regretted it immediately when he saw her expression. She looked disappointed, like a teacher watching students fail a test they should have passed easily. "Thank you for agreeing to this transmission," Diana began. "I'll be brief. Humanity is willing to resume limited cooperation with the Galactic Council under the following conditions." A document appeared in the air beside her hologram. Delegates' translators began rendering it immediately. Tolveen read with growing horror. "First," Diana continued, "humanity will have permanent seats on the Council's executive board with full veto power on any decisions affecting human interests or human allied species." "Unacceptable," Shala shouted. "That gives one species disproportionate power." Diana didn't even look at her. "Second, all human trade agreements with individual species will be honored and protected by Council law. Any attempt to interfere with these agreements will be considered an act of war against humanity." "You cannot dictate terms to the Council," Tolveen protested. "Third," Diana went on as if he hadn't spoken, "the Hurricane species will be classified as galactic criminals. Any Council species found supporting, trading with, or sheltering Hurricane forces will face immediate economic sanctions by humanity and allied species." Several delegates who had quietly traded with the Hurricane shifted uncomfortably. Fourth, reparations. The species and individuals responsible for dismissing human requests for aid during the New Perth massacre will pay damages to be determined by an independent tribunal. "Starting with you, High Arbiter Tolveen." Tolveen's patterns went completely dark. "This is outrageous. You're demanding reparations for following proper Council procedures." "I'm demanding reparations for allowing our civilians to be slaughtered and calling it acceptable losses," Diana corrected. "There's a difference." "Fifth," she continued relentlessly, "all human contributions to galactic infrastructure, software, and technology will be formally recognized with appropriate licensing fees paid retroactively for the past 73 years. The mathematical implications made several delegates gasp. That would be trillions of credits. Sixth, Council bylaws will be amended to ensure no species can be dismissed or ignored based on age of civilization or cultural development. All member species will have equal voice regardless of how long they've been traveling in space. That would fundamentally restructure the Council, Tolveen protested. Yes, Diana agreed. It would make it fair. Finally. She let the terms hang in the air for a moment, then continued. These are not negotiable. Humanity learned from the Council that negotiation is a waste of time. So we're not negotiating. Accept these terms in full or continue managing without us. You're blackmailing the galaxy, Shala screeched. No, Diana said calmly. We're establishing boundaries. Something we should have done 73 years ago. You taught us that being reasonable gets you ignored. So we stopped being reasonable. Senator Paul Wright appeared beside Diana's hologram. He was younger, harder, representing a new generation of human leadership that had no patience for galactic politics. Let me be crystal clear, Paul said. Humanity doesn't need the Council. We have alliances with 38 species. We control critical infrastructure across the galaxy. Our military has proven it can destroy anyone who threatens us. We're offering you a chance to remain relevant. Take it or don't. We'll be fine either way. Tolveen tried to maintain his authority. The Council will need time to review these terms and... You have 30 days, Diana interrupted. After that, the offer expires. We'll continue building our alternative alliance network, and the Council can fade into irrelevance. 30 days isn't enough time for proper deliberation, Tolveen protested. Wasn't enough time for our colonists on New Perth either, Diana replied. They died waiting for the Council to deliberate. Now you know how it feels to be on a clock. Her hologram vanished. Paul Wrights lingered a moment longer. One more thing, he said. Any species that votes to accept our terms will receive priority access to human trade, medical support, and security cooperation. Any species that votes against will be placed on a restricted list. Choose wisely. His hologram disappeared as well, leaving the council chamber in chaos. Delegates immediately began shouting. Some demanded Tolveen reject the terms. Others demanded he accept. The chamber split right down the middle, species, choosing sides based on how badly they needed humanity versus how much they valued their pride. Councillor Marek stood and quietly left. He'd already decided. His species would accept the terms council or no council. Pride didn't feed his people or protect their worlds. Over the next week, the political maneuvering was vicious. Tolveen tried to hold the anti-human coalition together, but it was crumbling. Species kept pulling him aside with whispered conversations about their situations. My worlds need human medical supplies. Our economy can't survive without human trade. The pirates are overwhelming our defenses without human patrols. We're facing famine. We're facing plague. We're facing rebellion because our citizens blame us for losing human support. Solvath didn't bother with private conversations. He publicly announced the Severian coalition would accept humanity's terms, regardless of the council's decision. My people's survival is more important than the council's pride, he said flatly. 6 more species immediately followed his lead. Then 12. Then 20. Tolveen watched his coalition dissolve and felt the bitter taste of defeat. Shala stood beside him, still defiant. We can rebuild without them, she insisted. We survived before humans arrived. We'll survive after. Will we? Tolveen asked. Or will we become irrelevant while humanity and their allies build a new galactic order without us? He didn't have an answer. Neither did Shala. On the 28th day, Tolveen called for a vote. He knew he'd lost, but hoped to salvage something from the disaster. The vote wasn't even close. 63 species voted to accept humanity's terms. 14 voted against. The rest abstained, which meant they were also accepting the terms but didn't want to publicly humiliate Tolveen further. The Council accepts humanity's conditions, Tolveen announced, his patterns dim with defeat. Ambassador Foster will be contacted to begin formal— No need, Diana's voice came from the speakers. Her hologram appeared again. I was watching. Welcome to the new era, High Arbiter. Try to keep up this time. Tolveen wanted to say something cutting, something that would restore his dignity. But he looked at the delegates, at the species who had voted against him, at the galaxy that had changed while he clung to tradition. He said nothing. There was nothing left to say. Humanity had won. Not through warfare, though they'd proven they could fight. Not through diplomatic brilliance, though Diana Foster was brilliant. They'd won by being necessary in ways the Council had never bothered to notice, then removing that necessity until the galaxy begged them to return, and this time, they returned on their own terms. 2 years had passed since Ambassador Diana Foster walked out of the Galactic Council. President Michael Torres stood at the viewport of Humanity Hall, the new headquarters of the interspecies assembly, and watched ships from 40 different species dock at the station orbiting Earth. Earth, the center of the new galactic order, not because humanity demanded it, but because everyone else had agreed it made sense. After all, humans built the station. Humans designed the security systems. Humans wrote the bylaws that ensured no species could be dismissed or ignored. It seemed fitting that Earth should host it. Quite a view, Admiral Patricia Cole said, joining him at the viewport. She wore her dress uniform, decorated with medals from conflicts the galaxy was still trying to understand. The Hurricane Pacification Campaign, the Severian Fleet Incident, the Drellin border actions, all fought and won within 18 months. We've come a long way, Michael agreed. Remember when we were begging for a single protected trade route? Patricia smiled without humor. Now we protect 40 different species trade routes. Funny how things change when you stop asking nicely. They watched a massive Severian diplomatic vessel approach the station. Premier Solvath was aboard, coming to negotiate a new technology-sharing agreement. The Severians had fallen far. Their economy was slowly recovering, But they'd lost their position as a galactic superpower. These days, they were just another council species grateful for human cooperation. "Any word on Tolveen?" Michael asked. "Under arrest," Patricia reported. "His own people charged him with criminal negligence. Apparently, when your decisions cause 40,000 deaths and economic collapse, even high arbiters face consequences." "Good," Michael said simply. Across the station, in what used to be called the council chamber but was now the assembly hall, Captain Owen Reed watched delegates file in for the opening session. He'd retired from diplomatic service but couldn't resist attending the historic moment. The old council was officially dissolving today, replaced by the Interspecies Assembly. 38 species had joined during the founding. Now that number was 74. More requested admission every week. The requirements were simple. Respect for all member species regardless of age or development. No tolerance for piracy or raiding. Fair trade practices. Mutual defense agreements. And an acknowledgement that humanity served as the Assembly's primary security guarantor. That last part bothered some species. Having humans as the galactic police felt like surrendering sovereignty. But then they looked at sectors that refused to join the Assembly, sectors where piracy had increased by 300%, where trade wars were raging, where the old council's bureaucracy had completely failed. The Assembly sectors were safe, prosperous, and fair. The council sectors were chaos. It wasn't a hard choice. Governor Rebecca Stone, former civilian, current representative of the outer colonies, took her seat in the Assembly Hall. She'd spent a year hunting Hurricane remnants before transitioning into politics. The Hurricane threat was mostly eliminated now. A few scattered groups remained, but they stayed hidden, terrified of attracting human attention. The galaxy had learned what happened when you made humans angry. The Hurricane learned it permanently. "Ready for your first session?" asked the delegate from Rex species. The little amphibian had become Rebecca's unlikely ally in the Assembly. "Nervous," Rebecca admitted. "I'm representing colonies that used to be ignored. Now we have the same Photis species that have traveled space for millennia. That's the point," Marek said gently. "No species is more important than another. Your colonists deserve protection just as much as Sivarian citizens. The old council forgot that. We won't." The session began with a formal declaration. The Galactic Council was dissolved. The Interspecies Assembly was now the recognized governing body for participating species. High Arbiter Tolveen's position was abolished. In its place, a rotating chairmanship that changed every year, with no single species holding permanent authority. Except humanity's veto power. That remained. Some delegates grumbled about it, but quietly. Nobody wanted to test whether humans would walk away again. Ambassador Diana Foster addressed the Assembly for the opening ceremony. She was older now, her hair showing gray. But her eyes were still sharp, still remembering everything the Council had done. 2 years ago, Diana began, humanity made a choice. We decided that patience has limits, that kindness can be withdrawn, that we would no longer accept being treated as lesser members of galactic civilization. The Assembly listened in perfect silence. This speech would be historical record, taught to students across hundreds of worlds. "We didn't want to leave the Council," Diana continued. "We wanted to be part of it, as equals. But equality isn't given. It's taken. So we took it. We withdrew our support, our expertise, our cooperation. We showed the galaxy what they'd been taking for granted." She paused, looking around at delegates from species who had once dismissed humanity as primitive. "Some of you suffered because of our choice. Your economies collapsed. Your people died. You faced threats without protection. And I understand your anger, but understand ours. We suffered first. Our colonists died while the Council deliberated. Our requests were denied while the Council laughed. Our dignity was insulted while the Council called it proper procedure." Silence. Deep, uncomfortable silence. "This Assembly exists because we taught you a lesson," Diana said. "We taught you that soft power is still power, that the species maintaining your infrastructure, healing your sick, buying your goods, and patrolling your space routes isn't weak just because they're not making demands. We taught you that pushing someone to their breaking point has consequences. She smiled then, and it was genuine. But we also taught you that humans remember kindness as much as insults. The species that reached out to us during our isolation, that acknowledged their mistakes, that treated us fairly from the start, they're our closest allies now. We remember who stood with us. Just like we remember who laughed at our dead. Premier Solvath shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His species had learned that lesson the hard way. This assembly represents a new beginning, Diana concluded. One where all species are heard, where justice isn't optional, where the strong protect the weak instead of exploiting them. We built this together and will maintain it together. But never forget how we got here. Never forget what happens when you mistake patience for weakness. The assembly erupted in applause. Not everyone meant it, Owen could tell. Some species still resented humanity's dominance, but they clapped anyway because not clapping would be noticed. Senator Paul Wright took the podium next, outlining the assembly's structure and bylaws. It was technical, boring, necessary. Owen stopped paying attention and looked around the hall instead. He recognized delegates who had been in the old council chamber that day Diana walked out. Some looked chastened, others defiant, most just tired. The last 2 years had been hard on everyone. The galaxy had been forced to reorganize itself around humanity's preferences, and that kind of change left scars. But it had been necessary. Owen believed that. The old council was a system designed for the powerful to maintain power. The assembly at least tried to be fair. Whether it would succeed long-term was an open question, but it was better than what came before. After the ceremony, Owen found himself sharing a drink with Counselor Mrek at the station's observation lounge. They watched Earth turn below, blue and green and beautiful. Your species did something remarkable, Mrek said. You broke a system that had existed for millions of years and replaced it with something better. We broke a system that broke us first, Owen corrected. We didn't want to do it. We were forced to. No, Mrek disagreed. You chose to. There's a difference. Many species suffer under unfair systems. Few have the courage to walk away and build their own. Owen considered that. You helped us. Your reports, your warnings to the council. That mattered. Mrek rippled with pleasure. I simply paid attention. Everyone else was too busy maintaining their positions to notice the galaxy was changing. Humans were becoming integral to everything, and nobody realized it until you were gone. Why didn't you say something sooner? I tried, Mrek said. Nobody listened. Minor species are heard about as well as primitive species were, but at least now we have the assembly. We have rules that matter. We have protection. We have a chance, Owen agreed. They drank in companionable silence, watching Earth turn. Across the galaxy in sectors that had refused to join the assembly, former council species dealt with the consequences of their choice. Piracy was rampant without human patrols. Trade was limited without human logistics networks. Medical research had stagnated without human collaboration. The old council still technically existed, but it governed nothing that mattered. Representative Shala commanded what remained of the Drellin delegation in the dying council. 7 species still attended sessions, all isolated, all suffering from their decision to maintain the old ways. They passed resolutions that nobody followed and made pronouncements that nobody heard. We should join the assembly, one of Shala's subordinates suggested quietly. Never, Shala replied. We would have to acknowledge that humans are our equals. That we were wrong. We were wrong, the subordinate said. Our economy is failing. Our people want to join. We're maintaining pride while our civilization crumbles. Shala said nothing. Pride was all she had left. On New Perth, a memorial stood where 3,000 colonists had died. Rebecca Stone visited when her assembly duties allowed. She placed flowers at her husband's marker and told him about the new galaxy they'd built. We won, she said quietly. Not the way I wanted. I wanted the council to help. I wanted justice through proper channels. But we got justice anyway, the hard way. She stood and looked at the settlement around the memorial. New Perth had been rebuilt. Bigger than before. Protected by human military forces that would never again ask permission to defend colonists. The Hurricane had learned what happened when they attacked humans. The galaxy had learned too. In Humanity Hall, President Michael Torres met with Admiral Patricia Cole to review the latest security reports. The Assembly's military, primarily human forces with allied species support, had conducted 83 operations in the past year. 83 times they'd protected trade routes, stopped pirate attacks, or prevented conflicts from escalating. Piracy in assembly sectors is down 87% from pre-assembly levels, Patricia reported. Trade volume is up 62%. Medical crises are being handled efficiently. Infrastructure is being maintained properly. And the council sectors? Michael asked. Chaos, Patricia said bluntly. They're experiencing everything we predicted. Without the systems humans maintained, without the security we provided, they're falling apart. Good, Michael said, then corrected himself. Not good that people are suffering. Good that they're learning. Some species in council sectors are requesting to join the assembly, Patricia noted. 17 applications this month alone. The council is dying. Within 5 years, I expect it will cease to exist entirely. Michael nodded. The galaxy was reorganizing itself around a simple truth humanity had demonstrated. Fair systems work better than exploitative ones. Cooperation produces better results than hierarchy. And dismissing species as primitive is a mistake that costs everyone. The old powers were learning. Slowly, painfully, but learning. Ambassador Diana Foster retired 6 months after the Assembly's founding. She'd done her job. The diplomatic groundwork was laid. New, younger ambassadors could handle the details. She returned to Earth, to a small house near the ocean, and tried to relax. She couldn't, not completely. 20 years of fighting for humanity's place in the galaxy had left marks. She still woke up sometimes remembering the words primitive and acceptable losses, and feeling that diamond-hard anger crystallize in her chest. But then she'd check the news and see reports of the assembly functioning, of species cooperating as equals, of human colonists living safely under assembly protection. And the anger would fade, replaced by something like satisfaction. They'd done it. Against all odds, humanity had forced the galaxy to be fair. Not through superior technology or ancient civilization, but through simple stubbornness and the willingness to walk away from a bad deal. Captain Owen Reed visited her sometimes. They'd sit on her porch, watch the ocean, and remember the day they walked out of the council chamber. Do you regret it? Owen asked during one visit. The way we did it? Letting the galaxy suffer to make a point? Diana thought about it. I regret that it was necessary. But no, I don't regret doing it. The council needed to learn. We taught them. We could have been gentler. We tried gentle for 73 years, Diana reminded him. Gentle doesn't work with people who think you're beneath them. Sometimes you have to be harsh. Sometimes you have to make them feel the consequences of their choices. Owen nodded. He'd made peace with it too. They sat in silence, 2 old diplomats who'd helped reshape the galaxy, and watched the sun set over Earth. Above them, the interspecies assembly station hung in orbit, a symbol of what could be built when species worked together as equals. The galaxy had finally learned what humanity knew all along. Patience isn't weakness. Kindness isn't submission. And treating people fairly isn't a favor you grant, it's a requirement you meet. Humanity had lost its patience. The galaxy felt it. And the galaxy was better for it, even if the lesson hurt. In the end, they all learned the same truth. Humans don't break. They bend until they're done bending. And when humans decide they're done, the galaxy changes to accommodate them, because that's what happens when you finally push the wrong species too far.